The mythology of DC Comics speedsters reaches its most complex and menacing peak in the figure of Savitar, a being who stands as a terrifying godlike entity within the Speed Force mythos. Unlike other villains that the Flash has faced, be it the methodical Eobard Thawne, Reverse Flash, the feral Zoom, or the impersonal threats of cosmic events, Savitar embodies a unique philosophical and metaphysical danger. He is not merely a fast man with evil intentions. He is a speedster who believes he is speed, who regards motion not just as a power, but as a transcendent state of being. Across both comics and television, Savitar has represented the darker side of speed, a corrupted mirror to Barry Allen's idealism and heroism. In examining his origins, power levels, representations across media, and the symbolic role he plays within the Flash mythology, we begin to see why Savitar is not only a major antagonist, but also a profound philosophical adversary. In the CW television series The Flash, Savitar is introduced during the third season, initially as a mysterious, omnipresent voice tormenting Team Flash before being fully revealed as a time remnant of Barry Allen himself. An echo from a future timeline where Barry had grown so desperate and fractured that he created copies of himself to fight an unbeatable foe. One such remnant survived, shunned by his own world and tormented by the knowledge that he was disposable. This remnant, driven by rage, loss, and a need to be remembered, found solace in the Speed Force and gradually evolved, or devolved, into the being known as Savitar, naming himself after the Hindu god of motion. This unique origin turns him into a symbolic representation of Barry's inner darkness, a being made from the very act of trying to win, a byproduct of desperation and flawed logic, given divine identity through suffering. This is a stark contrast to his comic book counterpart, first introduced in Flash, Volume 2, Number 108 in 1996. In the comics, Savitar was originally a nameless Cold War fighter pilot, later named Vladimir in some sources, who was conducting high-speed flight tests when he was struck by lightning and subsequently merged with the Speed Force. Unlike Barry Allen, who became the Flash and used his connection to the Speed Force for heroic acts, this man instead sought to understand, manipulate, and eventually own the Speed Force. He became obsessed with velocity, seeing it as a source of divine power. Rather than using his powers to save people, he created a cult dedicated to worshiping speed and himself as the deity who controlled it. In this version, Savitar is a brilliant tactician and a military commander who uses speed both as a weapon and a theology, empowering his followers with Speed Force abilities and forming a militant society of speed worshippers. The divergence in origin stories leads to fascinating thematic contrasts. The CW version of Savitar represents the consequences of Barry's choices. He is a literal product of time manipulation, hubris, and the dangers of trying to rewrite fate. In essence, he is Barry's own darkness turned into a god. The comic book Savitar, meanwhile, is a cautionary tale about obsession and the corrupting influence of power. His desire to control the Speed Force rather than coexist with it sets him apart from nearly every other speedster, including villains. Where Zoom seeks to make Barry suffer and Reverse Flash desires to erase him from history, Savitar wants to become the Speed Force itself, to bend the laws of motion to his will. When examining Savitar's speed, we encounter a daunting challenge. Quantifying the speed of a being who manipulates time and reality is inherently speculative, yet necessary to appreciate his power. In the CW series, Barry Allen by Season 3 had achieved speeds around Mach 13, approximately 9,800 miles per hour, and Savitar was consistently portrayed as significantly faster. In fact, Barry's inability to perceive Savitar's movements in their early encounters implies that Savitar was at least 50% faster, if not more. This places his base speed in the range of Mach 20, 15,000 miles per hour, or even higher. However, certain feats suggest his speed goes far beyond this. For example, Savitar demonstrates the ability to phase through solid objects, appear in multiple places within seconds, and manipulate time remnants, a process requiring such control over milliseconds and quantum interactions that it suggests thought processing speeds in the picosecond range. In one of his most remarkable displays, Savitar exits the Speed Force without assistance, a feat usually requiring an external anchor or an artificial opening. To do this, he must accelerate to such high speeds that he can break the Speed Force's temporal boundaries. Using time dilation principles from Einstein's theory of relativity, It is estimated that Savitar would have to reach 10% the speed of light, over 67 million miles per hour, to manipulate time enough to free himself. At these speeds, time slows for the runner while remaining normal for the outside world. This ability allows Savitar to appear almost omnipresent in battle, outpacing thought and defying logic. The comics version of Savitar, while less visually spectacular due to the limitations of the medium, is arguably even more dangerous due to his complete understanding and manipulation of the Speed Force. Unlike other speedsters who draw from the Speed Force instinctively, Savitar studies it like a scientist and manipulates it like a sorcerer. He can absorb kinetic energy, redirect motion, and grant or revoke speed powers in others. His philosophical and scientific mastery of speed makes him more than just fast. It makes him a master of motion itself. He is capable of turning a battlefield into a web of traps, using momentum as a weapon, and even slowing or speeding up molecules at will. This makes him less about pure velocity and more about control. The philosophical implications of Savitar are where his story becomes truly profound. In both media, he represents what happens when speed becomes not just power, but identity. He sees himself not as a man who runs fast, but as the physical embodiment of motion. This god complex is particularly emphasized in the television version, where his armor, a spiked, monstrous shell of black and blue, is not just for protection, but symbolic of his detachment from humanity. He no longer sees himself as Barry Allen or even a man. He is speed, untouchable and immortal. He even refers to himself in the third person as the god of speed, fully committed to the persona. In contrast, Barry Allen's journey is rooted in humility and responsibility. He sees his speed as a gift to be used wisely, not a birthright to conquer others. Savitar's armor in the CW show adds a technological layer that doesn't exist in the comics. It allegedly enhances his speed and protects him from other speedsters, but it also reflects his emotional state, cold, detached, and armored against his own pain. While comic book Savitar has no need for such technology, relying instead on his raw connection to the Speed Force, the show's Savitar clings to armor as a crutch and a statement of power. This contrast deepens their characterization. One is a man who became a god through study. The other, a god born from pain, desperate to prove his divinity. Ultimately, both versions of Savitar are defeated, but not without cost. In the comics, Wally West severs Savitar's connection to the Speed Force, effectively destroying him. This ending reinforces the idea that the Speed Force is not a weapon to be owned, but a cosmic balance that rejects those who abuse it. In the CW show, Savitar is erased from existence when Barry creates a timeline where the Time Remnant who becomes Savitar never exists. This paradoxical death reflects the series' fascination with time loops, destiny, and the consequence of interfering with fate. Despite his defeat, Savitar's impact is long-lasting. He changes how Barry sees himself and how viewers understand the Speed Force. He introduces the concept of speed as religion, speed as philosophy, and speed as identity. He is not merely a faster foe. He is what Barry could become if stripped of his humanity. He is the ultimate embodiment of speed without compassion, motion without morality. In conclusion, Savitar is a richly layered antagonist whose power, philosophy, and psychological complexity make him one of the Flash's most formidable foes. Whether portrayed as a militant zealot in the comics or a broken god in the television series, he challenges both the limits of speed and the ethics of its use. His feats, ranging from time manipulation to speedster domination, solidify him as a being whose threat is both physical and existential. Savitar doesn't just outrun Barry Allen, he forces him to question what it means to be the fastest man alive. And in doing so, he earns his place as not just a villain, but a mythic force in the saga of the Scarlet Speedster.